What we usually call official history often feels like a freshly painted wall. From a distance it looks solid, logical, even impressive. But when you tap on it, the sound is hollow. St. Isaac's Cathedral in St. Petersburg is one of those monuments where the echo is impossible to ignore. According to textbooks and guided tours, the story is neat and reassuring. A small wooden church once stood here. It was replaced by a stone one. That one failed too. Finally, in the 19th century, after many mistakes, the magnificent cathedral we see today was built. A simple evolution, primitive to advanced, failure to success. But history that sounds too clean is often hiding something. The architect who feels more like a function than a person. We are told that the modern cathedral was designed by Auguste de Montferrand. His name appears everywhere, unquestioned. Yet when examined closely, the name itself raises strange questions. In French, parts of the name resemble technical terms rather than a personal identity, words connected to mounting, iron, and circular forms. This opens an uncomfortable possibility. What if this architect was not a single genius, but a later personification of a role, a guild, or a construction function related to metal dome technology? This would explain why his name suddenly appears in history exactly when massive metal structures become central to the project and nowhere else before. A timeline framed by war. Too perfectly. Officially, construction lasted from 1818 to 1858, exactly 40 years. Those dates alone may seem harmless, until they are placed into real historical context. Construction begins just a few years after the catastrophic Napoleonic invasion of Russia. The empire was exhausted, cities burned, finances shattered. Yet somehow, at this exact moment, one of the most expensive and technically complex projects in Europe begins. Then comes the end date, 1858, immediately after the Crimean War, another disaster that drained the state treasury. A monumental project perfectly framed by two devastating wars. And then there is the number itself, 40. In mythology and religious tradition, 40 rarely means a precise measurement. It usually means a long, difficult period. A symbolic placeholder, not a stopwatch. This raises a disturbing question: were these dates recorded, or were they assigned asterisk? The cathedral that was already there. According to official history, before Montferrand's project, a third St. Isaac's Cathedral stood on the site. It was supposedly completed and consecrated in 1802. Here is the problem: if a massive stone cathedral already existed in 1802, why would it be demolished or fundamentally rebuilt just 16 years later? Stone buildings do not decay beyond salvation in a decade and a half. Especially not imperial ones constructed over 30 years with enormous resources. And yet, the official narrative asks us to accept exactly that. What old images actually show? Instead of relying on documents, which are easy to rewrite, we can turn to something far more stubborn: visual evidence. Engravings, paintings, and lithographs from the late 18th and early 19th centuries show a very different story. Long before the supposed start of construction in 1818, a monumental structure already dominates St. Isaac's Square. Not ruins. Not scaffolding. A finished, functioning building. Its proportions, mass, and core geometry closely resemble the modern cathedral. The differences are in the details that look less like a new building and more like stages of modification. It feels less like multiple cathedrals replacing one another, and more like one ancient structure being repeatedly altered. The disappearing rotundas. One of the clearest examples lies on the roof. In early images, the four corner structures are not bell towers at all. They are wide, elegant rotundas, fully enclosed circular pavilions with dense rings of columns and their own domes. They look ceremonial, monumental, and deliberate. Today, those same positions are occupied by narrow bell towers. Something drastic happened. The transformation required removing columns, reducing diameters, and even shifting structural positions using awkward rectangular extensions, solutions that make no sense in a building designed from scratch, but make perfect sense in a forced adaptation of an older structure. Simple math reveals another uncomfortable fact: dozens of granite columns vanished from the roof. Granite does not disappear. It gets reused. Where are they now? Bells that don't belong. Inside the modern bell towers, the illusion completely collapses. Instead of elegant stone engineering, we find crude 19th century industrial solutions, riveted steel beams, rough iron clamps, and primitive fastenings. The bells are fixed immovably, their clappers pulled by ropes, an inferior ringing method used only when proper bell mechanics are impossible. This tells us something critical: the towers were never designed for bells. The builders were not creating, they were improvising. Trying to force a new religious function into a space that resisted it. An interior that doesn't match its shell. The same conflict exists inside. The iconostasis, despite its luxury, looks like an inserted screen blocking the original architectural rhythm. It does not grow from the structure, it interrupts it. The floor beneath the central dome deepens the mystery even further. Instead of Christian symbolism, the dominant imagery is solar. Radiating patterns. Cosmic geometry. Rotational symbols associated with ancient Eurasian star lore. These are not accidental decorations. In ancient architecture, floors were symbolic maps. Instruments of meaning. This space was not designed as an Orthodox church. Statues that shouldn't be there. Old images also show something even harder to explain: rooftop sculptures depicting antique figures, men in classical robes, heroic poses, even scenes strongly associated with Alexander the Great taming his horse. What is Alexander of Macedon doing on the roof of Russia's main cathedral? This makes no sense within official chronology. It makes perfect sense if the structure predates Romanov ideology and was inherited rather than created. A temple rebranded. Put together, the evidence points to a single conclusion. St. Isaac's Cathedral was not built in the 19th century. It was rebranded in the 19th century. An ancient monumental structure, possibly a solar temple or observatory, was adapted, modified, stripped of its original symbols, and given a new identity. Bells replaced observation spaces. Crosses replaced cosmic markers. A new origin story replaced an old one. The legend of three cathedrals serves one purpose: to erase continuity. Stone remembers what paper forgets. Paper can be edited. Dates can be reassigned. Names can be invented. Stone cannot lie. The Cyclopean foundations, the impossible columns, the mismatched technologies all testify to a civilization whose capabilities we still struggle to explain. St. Isaac's Cathedral stands not as a triumph of 19th century engineering, but as a monument to historical amnesia. Look at your own city. The train stations that look like temples. The theaters with antique porticos. The buildings that feel older than their plaques claim. History is not missing. It is buried in plain sight. And stone is still waiting for us to listen.